So the recording has started. We can begin with the session.
Is my screen visible? Okay. So, uh, the agenda is going to be this way. It's like, first of all, we will be seeing Kubernetes in plain English, nothing fancy, no technical terms involved. Then we'll be seeing like in a more simple way, a little like a step ahead. Then we will see what is Kubernetes. Then we will see few concepts like orchestration pods. Mostly, I'll stop after pods, and Shubhankar will continue with nodes and clusters with his PPT. And services will see if time permits, else we will do the first lab. We'll move ahead. So, okay. So this is the case. Let's say, okay, this is a very hypothetical situation. We never get like more than like 100 people as well. But let's say that this is a very hypothetical situation where we have 100 people. Topic one, we have planned it in this way that topic one is being taken by Ali. Topic two will be taken by Nikita. What happens is 200 people come over. Not the problem of meet, but obviously Ali and Nikita, like each of us will be able to only handle 100 people's doubt at one point, not those 200 people's doubt. So this was the issue here. So what we did was we arranged two meets, and in both of the meets, what we did was we had like topic one is for Ali, topic two is for Nikita. In the second meet, since Nikita is free here, we can have her here. Topic one will be for Nikita, and topic two will be for Shubhankar. Everything is in place, okay? But can you all see one thing like, okay, consider this part, Ali and Nikita. Consider these things as containers, okay? These are the teachers here, so you all can consider them as containers. So did you all see when there was a need for to increase the meet, to scale up, like why we will have to again look for another set of teachers, and we will also have to look for who are comfortable with topic one, who is comfortable with topic two. So all these management, when suddenly the scaling happens, there should be someone who needs to take care of all these things, right? So uh, okay, for now you can think of each of one of us as a you can think of each one of us as a container. And in order to, like, whatever we are teaching, the contents that we are teaching, that is already present in one image. But okay, first of all, I'm assuming you all have attended the Sunday session where we talked about containerization, Docker, all those things. So I won't be going in that part much, but you all can think of this as like all the contents that we teach are available in one image. So in order for us to take one topic will be such that we have to run this image to make a container where Ali will be teaching his part and Nikita will also be since it is topic one, the contents will be same, just that we are the different containers. Similarly, it goes for topic two as well. Did you all notice one thing, that all these things, all of us are, whenever the meet number of, just notice these things, whenever the number of meets increased, we had to arrange for more number of teachers, right? And I'll come to this part like after the next slide. Till then, okay, we'll come to next parts. We'll move to the next slide. Okay, now what happens is, let's say again the meet number has increased. So already we four teachers are assigned, like we are all of us are busy here. So there should be, and since like we have now 500 people, so there should be someone who will manage all these things. That if we have 500 people, so there should be someone who will be like, we have more number of teachers, that is not an issue, but to assign, like whenever the system increases, whenever the system scales up, I need to assign some of the like resources here. So this task needs to be done. This is the first thing. The second thing that needs to be done is, okay, let's say I am taking a session, like we are here. Okay, I am taking a session, let's say, and then I got a call from my mom. She tells me, okay, I am not at home, but I need you to make sure that the pressure cooker, the number of whistles in the pressure cooker is 3. Once that is done, turn off the gas. And I am taking the session here. But since mom has given the order, I need to switch my, obviously you all know the priority, right? I'll have to go there. I'll have to, and that requires concentration. So I have to switch from here to here. I have to run away from here. So now this node, this pod, okay, this thing is not available here. So there should be someone who should be monitoring all the needs and taking care that if someone is not there, the facility should be such that it should be like replaced very quickly. If Nikita is not there, let's ask Dhwani to continue with the session as she is available. Ali is busy, Shubhankar is busy, everyone is busy. Dhwani, from this set of people, I can find Dhwani. So there should be some, but these are just 4 needs. What if there are hundreds of needs and we don't know like which like I ran away for some time because I got a more like I got one order from the home. So we need someone to monitor what's happening here, and if anything fails, if anything is not available, we need that things in, right? So for ours, like all the needs that we take place, everything that for the teachers part, Palak handles all of them. So yeah, so I'll move ahead. Let's say, okay, also, also let's take one more scenario. Let's say, okay, I'll take Nita back, her work is done. The call part is okay. So let's say what will happen is, okay, since everyone except for Nita, Ali, Nikita, Shubhankar, Dhwani, all of them are very hardworking, so the problem won't be there. But let's say that the teaching energy of Nikita is going slow. It's like slowing down. Like I am first of all initially teaching very enthusiastically with all the resources. I'm using optimum number of resources. But then it's 5:45. Then at 6:50 or 6:45, I like sort of get tired. You can say tired, or maybe I get like I am not giving my best in teaching, and you all are not able to understand what I am doing. So there should also be someone who is monitoring all of the meets and taking care that if someone is not working as expected, you should remove them and you should make sure the other person is in. Okay. So there should be someone to the like the example I have given you, like we don't have many needs, but it's just a hypothetical example. There should be someone to monitor all these things. Like if someone is not giving their best, if someone's is not giving more than their 50%, remove that node and add in another node in there. Okay. So this is also one of the things that Palak does. And let's move ahead. So what like okay, obviously when I say topic 1 and topic 2 teachers, obviously there will be something that let's say
Okay, so as Nikita rightly mentioned, there is a problem and we need to solve it. So let's see.
yes, I'm back. Sorry, I had some network issue.
Yes, Nikita, I was handling.
I hope you.
Yes, I was handling.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think we gave a live example for that. But yeah, I am back, so that's fine. I think it's okay. Okay. So let's say where was I? Okay, the topic 1, Palak knows like the topic 1 has been handled by these people. Topic 2 has been handled by these people. Whenever anything from this part fails, I need to assign it to all of them. So okay, so this was just a very high overview of like I hope like just a high overview of whenever these things happen. What happens is like if anything fails if any node becomes unavailable, if any node is not giving their best, if any node falls ill, or you can say a health check is not good for that node. So there should be like all of us, like there should be someone to monitor, right? So one of the examples I also read was of if there are suppose if your building needs 5 guards. I read it somewhere on Quora, I don't remember the author. So he said, like, if there are 5 guards in the if your building needs 5 guards to guard your building in the night, but let's say one of the guard goes off, okay, like goes off meaning he has some like he goes away for some other work. So are you like going to be do you have to manually monitor all of them, or it would have been better if there is someone who is doing all of these? So let's say if we didn't have Palak, it would have been very difficult for us. Like if I would have ran away, this like meet might have failed, it might have been a failure. Or let's say if like I would have been not giving my best, this meet would have got very less reviews or etc. So all of these things are being handled by someone, right? So this is a few, these are the few okay. So basically whatever I talked about now, that okay, so the desired state for, let's suppose we don't have the next 2 meets, let's say the desired state for these 2 meets is we need 4 teachers, right? So you can say the desired state is Palak has to make sure that she always maintains the 4 teacher set at any point of time, okay? So she makes sure this part, this is a very small example of just two meetings. You can imagine, like if you have some hundreds of applications and like hundreds of like things running on, so we need someone to monitor them, right? So monitoring the strength, like as I told, like if Nikita is not giving the 100%, she will remove her and she'll take someone. And like we have more people, Dhwani, Kritika, Rachna, Harsh, Anirudh. So yeah, so basically all of these topics, so she'll do them, like she'll maintain all of these things, right? So if in this example I tell you the teacher, you can say we are the okay. Before going to pods, let's like I hope you all must have got by now that Palak can be like, we can say this is how like Kubernetes is. It manages everything for me. Okay. So but when I say Palak manages it all, it is wrong, because Kubernetes is not just one centralized thing that manages everything for us. Inside Kubernetes also we have many more components like kubectl, API servers, and all those things. So it's basically sort of like a Zaz, like all the musical instruments operating together. So yeah, there is a set of actors that are playing off each other to coordinate and react. So when we learned about Docker container, it's fine. Docker is just one container teaching. It's just Ali teaching. It's just Nikita teaching. But it's just any one of us teaching. It's just Shubhankar teaching. So but like managing it all for like the real life applications, it's very difficult for just Docker. Docker will be just this part, but managing it all is what Kubernetes does. So yeah, so this was did I miss anything? So yeah, I talked about this what is called as um, you like for now I'm referring these as containers. Give me some time, we will understand what pods is. We will move to that part, but like all of you all understood this, what I wanted to explain in this first part, Kubernetes in plain English, was like a little bit understanding. So also I hope you all must have for now let's wait for pods. For now consider them as containers, but containers is a wrong word to use. For now take it as a pods only. I will explain pods in the coming session, don't worry about that. Okay, this will be covered later after completing the pod. Kubernetes is basically, as you all saw, it was an orchestration tool. Now deployments for like container-based workloads, as you all must have seen, there were different container-based workloads, and he managed it all. Whenever I needed to deploy something, like or maybe whenever I needed to scale something, deploy meaning I wanted to start a new meeting, arranging the teachers, everything is done by like Kubernetes. He say like okay, that's it. That's about Kubernetes. Okay, so Docker is saying, you all can see that Docker, he's saying that, okay, building images and running containers, that's fine. but I cannot like coordinate running hundreds of like, okay, when I say container, it's basically whenever I say container, it's basically how I can say, yeah. So basically, Docker is running one application inside it, which is isolated from everything else. So we have covered it. I'm not going into the details. We have covered it already. So Docker says my part was to run an application in an isolated environment. But now you're telling me to run the same container hundreds of times across different machines. Are you sure? But this is not my work. So Kubernetes says, "मैं हूं ना." So what does this Kubernetes does? He will like orchestrate things, automate deployment and scaling, uptime, networking, storage, like all these things we will understand later. But like for now, I hope you all understood. Also, just to clarify, Palak is not just a Kubernetes part. Also, although she is doing a great job, she also teaches as well. So that's a nice thing. Huh? But now, like, let's say Nikita says, I am a teacher. I don't want to manage all these things. If anything fails, like, where do I concentrate more? I concentrate more in the meeting, or I concentrate more if anything fails. So yeah, Kubernetes says, don't worry, मैं हूं ना, like you do your work, I will do the work of managing things. So I read it somewhere. So I found it useful and thus pasted it here. What it says is some containers will want to be replicated multiple times. Some will want to run only once, and some might need to run every 6 hours. So all of these customizing and all, Kubernetes manages it for all of us. Okay. So I think we covered all the slides till here. And like only this part I'll cover after the pods. Okay. Okay, I'll cover it after the. Okay, I'll take it right now. But if there's any doubt, we will cover those doubts after the pods part. So let's say for the what exactly is a pod is nothing but I hope like by now all of you know what a container is, right? So let's say let me just okay. I hope all of us know what a container is. So let's say that yeah. So this topic one is one container and topic two is some another container. Now let's say that Kubernetes doesn't allow me to only run this like one container. It has one more layer above this container, and that Kubernetes calls this layer as pod. So this layer above this is called as a pod. Okay, so what pod says is you can run more than one containers inside me and give this to Kubernetes instead of giving just the container. Okay, so it's basically a container, like a one layer above the container. Okay, so when I say when you say like when I say a pod can have multiple containers inside it, so what I mean is that Dhwani and Shubhankar, let's say they both can communicate like since they are in one meet only, right? They can communicate very easily with each other, and they can use the same meet resources. Like if any doubts of one meet, if they are let's say in the meet two, so if they are in the meet too, so any doubts or anything in this meet, they can communicate with each other, they can share the resources with each other through the chat. So all of them, they can do it like here. There's no worries. And let's say Kritika is in the meet 3. So Kritika cannot communicate more of like with Dhwani or Shubhankar, right? Because they are in different pods itself. They can communicate. There are ways like they can use Gmail or etc., but not the direct communication. They cannot directly share the same chat, meet chat. So when I say two containers run in the same pod, I mean is easy communication or relation of topics along with maintain. Okay, obviously when Shubhankar explains his topic, Dhwani maintains isolation. Like they both are isolated from each other, and explain about how pods can have. Okay, I explained how they can have multiple containers, but now there is one thing that people say: it's not preferable to have like more than. It's not preferable to have more than one containers inside a pod. Okay, so it's not preferable. Okay, my bad. Yeah, so what the pod says is like obviously like it's possible you can have multiple containers inside one pod, but try your best that you only have just one container running. So why is that so? Let's say I have okay, I think I should have kept that. I shouldn't have erased it. I'll do it again. Okay. Let's say we have two parts here. We have Kritika, we have Harsh. So let's say we have two teachers here. Now let's say like Kritika wants to teach something, but like both of them have want to teach Docker. So Kritika will teach about architecture, and Harsh will be teaching about images and containers. But don't you think there will be like sort of what we say overlapping between what they are teaching? And let's say there are hundreds of meets, and Harsh is very energetic. Okay, he is able to, like, once he teaches here, he is ready to scale up and go fatafat to the next meet, then he is ready to go to the third meet, he is ready to go to the fourth meet. But what Kritika does is she explains things in very detail, so she is only able to stay in one meet for more amount of time. Okay, so the problem with the pods is when I am inside one pod, if I have two containers and if I have to scale these containers for different meets, the problem is I'll have to scale the complete container, not just like the complete pod, not just one container, right? So there will be a problem of the this mismatch of the speed or the compute power. So if critical, like if I have to scale the pod, but it's okay if I don't scale Harsh, like it's okay if I just have one resource of this teacher, that's also fine. So it's not a good idea to store all the containers inside one pod. Thus it's always better to just, like, most of the times have just one pod. And if I would have another pod for Harsh as well, I could have easily scaled it, right? I hope like you got the difference what I was trying to say. Was it clear? Like whatever is written in this slide, easy communication or relation of topics along with maintaining isolation of own functionality. However, they can have multiple containers, but it's preferable to have just one, because we need to scale just one container whenever, not the complete pod. So was it okay? Can we move ahead? Can you please repeat the scaling part here? Okay, I'll give you an example. If it's not clear with the meat part, let's say like we don't have workshops here virtually. We have them in the classrooms. Okay, so when we have in the classrooms, so what happens is let's say we have 5 classrooms and we have 2 teachers, Kritika and Harsh. What will happen is, if let's say like both of them are teaching their part, Harsh like not like their part is related as well. So let's say Harsh is like, he is very fast. What he'll do is he'll be teaching about containers in the first class, then he will run away to the first floor, he'll go to the second class, he'll teach there. Like it's like I can use Harsh for more number of times, and for Kritika she explains them in very detail. So for every like for all the 5 classes, I need the Kritika again and again. Okay, so we can have that again and again. So what will happen is like, did you get my point when I say I will be only like, it's instead of scaling only like both of Kritika and Harsh, it will be better if I only scale Kritika, not Harsh, because I like it will be wastage of resource if I scale Harsh 5 times. Was I able to clear your doubt there? Yeah? Yes, got it. Dhwani asks if you have just one container in one pod. Okay, Dhwani, yeah, good question. Actually, in Qubit, like you can have multiple containers as well. And inside, like when I go to the pod, I will explain you more about networking. Like each pod has its own IP address also associated with it. Each pod is inside something called as a service. So there are some more number of layers. I just try to simplify it down for you. So for now, you can think of it as just a layer of abstraction that like Kubernetes has for the containers. So containers are inside pod, but the use of pod is they have their own IP address. They like I can use them for communication, and I also can have multiple containers inside pods. It's not that I cannot have. There are many cases where like I can have, when the scaling part is like I can scale both of Kritika and Harsh in equal manner. Was I able to clear your doubt, Dhwani and Maitri? There are more than one pod, right? Yes, there are more than one pods. So pod is basically which contains containers and establishes relationships, like relations between them. Yes, and many much more. We will move ahead and see like what all things. More than one containers in one pod is only preferable if they have similar performance. I'm not sure, but yes, I think not similar performance. If I need to, like if I don't have any other option. I want Kritika and Harsh, both of them, to be here itself, because the topics are very dependent. One cannot exist without the other. Container in a pod can't be. Oh, no. Containers in a pod are isolated. They are completely independent. Okay, they are completely independent. Just that, you can say they work in a different. That's why I was not taking the pods part. I thought to cover it using the lab, but because containers in a pod, they are isolated from each other. You can think of this as an example that Kritika's topics, Kritika will be teaching in her own manner and Harsh will be teaching in his own manner. There is no they are isolated from each other, right? Neha, did you get my point? What I was trying to say? They are isolated. Okay. So I hope I was able to clear your doubts. Can we move ahead? Okay. Also, all of them are my friends. I hope none of them feels bad for anything. If I say anything, so yeah, I just took their examples because the names I can think, Anirudh and everyone. So we'll move ahead. I hope all the slides still here are very clear to you all. Okay, we'll move ahead. Since I covered the core part, let's just the definition before moving to the architecture part. Already working with containers, a small layer of abstraction. Pod can contain one or more containers, and all containers run on the same machine, share same network storage life cycle. As I told, they are in the same need. They can see the same amount of people. They can share the same resources, all the resources that are shared in the chat section, as they are in the same need. Now, as you all asked me, we cannot deploy a container, but we can whenever I want to deploy something, I take a container, whatever the application is inside it, I put it inside a pod and then I deploy it. How and why, we will see that later. I just wanted to cover this as we have done it already. Let's see the architecture of Kubernetes now. Okay, no doubts, right? Yeah. So let's say this is okay. First things first, I am giving a very high level overview of this part. Everything, when I say master nodes, worker nodes, whenever I say services, deployment, all these things we will cover in more detail after. This is just a high level working of how Kubernetes is working. Whenever I say anything, the internal parts of what they all contain, what is this master node, this API server, so all of these things we will cover later. Actually, this master node and worker node, we will cover today only. For the rest of things like services, APIs, deployments, we will cover them in the coming sections. I just wanted to before understanding each part, I just wanted to tell you all how they all connect. Okay, so let's say I have an image called as my image, and I need using this image. I want to okay. I have two. First of all, as I hope you all can now relate these things. So I have two things. One is front end, and the other is back end. Okay. One pod is my front end and the other pod is a backend. When I say pod, imagine it as a container. There is a container which has its front end code running inside it, and there is another container which has its backend code running inside it. Okay, so both of them are there, and both of them are different pods because obviously they both are doing some different work. So when using this image, I am asking to create a container, and this is something I call it as a pod. Okay, so these are two smallest. Pod is something very when we say Kubernetes, the smallest unit that I can think of anything is a pod. Okay, so pod is nothing but imagine it as one container, as I already said, that has this image for the front end part and this image for the back end part. Okay, so let's say you all tell me, okay, there is for the Kubernetes. When I say I want to this pod, I want to deploy it. I want to deploy it somewhere. When I say deploy, meaning I want to run it on one machine so that it is accessible to other users. Okay. Obviously, we will cover deployments in more detail. We have a plan for that. So let's say this is a master node and this is a worker node. Okay. So what happens is I need one master node for everything that happens. Okay. as I said, Palak manages it all of it together, and still, not just Palak cannot manage everything. There are some other components as well. So you all can think that there are some more worker nodes as well. Okay, there are some worker nodes here. So there are few people who help Palak with all these things. Okay, so this is a master node. Whenever someone says I want to deploy this pod, or whenever someone says anything else, so these are the manifest files. We send them to this cube, something called as kubectl. Just think of this as someone who just sends these files to this master node, and then this basically I can communicate with the master node using this API server. We know like what API is, right? So I can communicate with master node using this API server. So what will happen is this pod will say, hey kubectl, send me to the master node, I want to get deployed. Then this kubectl sends it to the API server. This API server sees, okay, ignore everything written inside this, right? F and all these things I'll explain later. So this kubectl, like a master node says, okay, you are a pod, you want to get deployed, you are a front end application, and you have a label called as F. I will see if I have any worker node free. So let's say, okay, this worker node is free. Please go there. I go there and start running. Okay. So let's say, okay, so this was just for one part. Okay. But let's say for the deployment, I need three such two front-end replicas of it. Okay, for deployment or do you remember when I said desired state previously? I said I always need 4 teachers. So the need for my application is it always needs 2 front-end replicas because it cannot handle the traffic with just one replica. Okay, so it says, hey API, I am the pod image, but listen, I am just one. But I hope you already know my deployment part. Like, you know that I need 2 front-end replicas. So master says, okay, you need 2 front-end replicas, but I to already had just one replica running as you had previously said. But since you asked me for 2, don't worry, I will assign it to some worker node who is already free. Okay, so this was the front-end replica. Like the first front-end replica, I have already kept running, but since you have asked me for 2, I don't worry, I will make sure that that is also done. So this front-end replica is set here. So the worker node will be the one responsible for all these things. Then if my backend requires just one replica, there will be just one replica. Okay, so all of these nodes are Kubernetes running inside them. And when I say as I said previously, someone monitors the health of all these nodes. So there is something called as kubelet. It monitors the health of these worker nodes. Okay, more about this we will study in detail later, but I hope you got the crisp of what's happening, right? It's similar to the meeting wala part only, just that the desired state now is instead of teachers, it's front end and back end. And Palak, this is Palak who has a team, and she is maintaining all that stuff, like 2 meetings, two replications of topic 1, 1 replication of topic 2, that way. And okay, now as I told you all, this F pod, when I say this is an F pod, so basically it will have its own IP address, right? As I have already told, F is nothing but just one machine. Okay, it will have its own IP address because I need to communicate, as I said, suppose let's say this is Anirudh. Anirudh has his own contact number, right? I can contact him through there. So F has, they all have their own IP address. So all the pods have their own IP address. But let's say if this pod gets destroyed, we don't know who the other pod is. If let's say another pod is created as soon as this pod is destroyed. So there is some another pod, but then his IP address will change, right? So for the pods, when they are destroyed and created back, their IP address keeps on changing. Okay, there is no guarantee that they will remain same always. So their IP address keeps on changing. So I need someone. So what I need is I don't want to get dependent on these individual teachers or these individual pods. What I want to do is I need something such that whenever I ask them, hey, topic 1 ready. So anyone, it doesn't matter. Anirudh comes, Harsh comes, Nikita comes. It doesn't matter. Or Dhwani comes. It doesn't matter. Let's say whenever I say topic 1 label, all of them have a label called as topic 1, and anyone who is ready, they come back to me. Okay. So I need something more reliable. Instead of just having the IP address of each node that gets on changing, I just rely on something called as a service. Obviously, service is a much more deeper concept. We will cover that in detail. But for now, you can think of this as both of these front ends will be in one service and this backend will be in one other service, as it was explained previously. Now, when I like these services will have their own cluster IP addresses for communication. So whenever I ask for the cluster IP of this service, I can communicate with these services will have one cluster IP. This will have some another cluster IP. So like this was a very difficult part for me to explain for the architecture. I know many doubts would be like how service, why service, and like deployments, these nodes, master and all. I just wanted to tell you all how this Kubernetes like makes the things simpler for us. I just had to, as a developer, my part was just inside this image. I just had to write the code, and even for the Docker part, it was still here. But all these things after that, Kubernetes made sure that all of this is handled. So this was the architecture of Kubernetes. Can we move ahead? A few yes or a few no? Yes. Just one yes. How about like any doubts? Are there any doubts? If I was not clear, please let me know. Can you please repeat the service part? Okay. So, see, when I say, okay, can you think of it as this way? Think of it as this way. I'll try to make it more simpler, but obviously it's much more than that. Let's say on WhatsApp, we have different groups, right? So like we have different groups. Like for example, we have a group called as Track 1 volunteers, and we have a group called as Track 2 volunteers for GCP. Okay. So let's say if someone asks me a doubt for Track 1, what I can do is I can, instead of finding someone who has done Track 1, instead of finding the contact number of them, I can directly go on to that WhatsApp group and write, hey, anyone who has done the Track 1. So that will be called as that service has made sure to already collect all those people who have completed Track 2 and are ready to volunteer. So any one of them can come up and like help me out, right? So instead of pods, like instead of these one individual services, we have something called as a group, like services group these pods, and like instead of having like individual contact numbers, that IP addresses actually, not the contact numbers. These IP, like once this pod is destroyed and another one is created, I won't be able to communicate at the same IP address, right? If I am an outside client, let's say I am an outside client here, and the IP address of this F is a.b.c.d. I say, okay, I will always rely on a.b.c.d. So I am backend. Okay, I want to communicate with the front end. I will always rely on a.b.c.d for this. But let's say that this pod gets destroyed. Okay, another pod is created, no worries. But this pod has an IP address of x.y.z.w. Okay, now this B already, like he is trying to reach out to a.b.c, but he is not able to. He instead like has to again change this part to x.y.z.w. If you are ready to always like maintain this networking part yourself, if you are ready to make sure that whenever that goes down, let's tell B that you can communicate to do x.y.z.w. If you are ready to do this networking part by yourself, that's fine. That's completely fine. Kubernetes is okay. But why do I do it, right? I need it. Wouldn't it have been better like if I have a constant IP address to communicate with, and let's say, wouldn't it have been like more better to instead have one constant IP address, and inside it I don't care whoever it is. Like if I have this one F with one IP address, this is with some other IP address. Okay, I think everything is going away. Let's not do. So, like, did you all get my point? Instead of going just to a.b.c.d, and he is not that one person. If he gets destroyed, if that pod gets destroyed, whom do I communicate it? I need someone more reliable. I need something called as services then. So what services will do it? it will be sort of like an interface. Whenever I hit that service will our service IP, service will make sure any pod running inside it, it will make sure that I am contacted with them. So like, did you all get the analogy of WhatsApp group? Like, instead of communicating always with just one person, and what if he is not replying to me, or he just changes his number? Instead of that, there should be one WhatsApp group where there should be many more people I can rely on, and I can just directly write my this part there. Was it clear, all of you who had the doubts? A few yeses, and then we will move ahead. Okay, just 3. Any more doubts? I'm waiting. kubectl will cover it, don't worry. This was just a high level overview. Static one, you can think of it as like, if I give it to someone, it will remain constant, no doubt. Like, someone can communicate through that, but I'm not sure like if it will change after a given amount of time. I'll let you know there about this, but according to me, it should be, given the use case. I'll let you know if there is some specific amount of time that it is static. Yes, the use that. Like, I just wanted to make sure if Kubernetes like changes them, and still it handles to if it changes one service IP, it will make sure in the configuration file it will change it for all, like it will change it for everyone. Like, I am not sure about it. I'll let you know that. Any more doubts? Can we move ahead? Okay, I think my part is mostly done except for life cycle of pod, and then Shubhankar will take over. So basically, let's say since we have taken the pod part, okay. Since we have taken the pod part, like the pod has different life cycles. Okay, it has some life cycle of pending, running, succeeded, failed, etc. So I have taken this image from this amazing blog. You all can refer that later. So what this is basically is, am I audible? Yes. So, okay. So what will happen is, let's say this, if you all remember, there was something in this diagram. Someone said create the pod, right, to the API server. So if this is my API server that I told about for the etcd scheduler, all these things Shubhankar will take. Let's say if I say create pod, what the API server will do, it will say, okay, I remembered I have to create your pod. It will write it to its database. That's it. So initially, like, what will be done is, basically this any client or this kubectl, it submits the pod, like I need a pod to this API server. This API server writes the pod object to this data store. We'll cover this later. Once this is successful, I'll get an acknowledgement that it is written. Now this scheduler, like at this state now, the pod is in this state. It is pending. The API server is validated, the entry is created, but still the container that is inside the pod, it is not running yet. Okay, it is not yet started running. So this scheduler, this will always be watching. Like this scheduler will always be watching, is there any pod that I need to bind with myself, and I like need to start running them. So all of this, like a new, like this scheduler sees that, okay, a new object is created on API server, but it's not yet bound to any node. Node meaning any machine. Details will be covered very soon. So this kube scheduler assigns a node, and then like after this, what this scheduler does is, this will be like a pod. Okay, give me 1 minute. So let's say this is a pod. Inside it, there is a container that has some front end running. So this front end needs some virtual machine, right, to run, or some node to run. So this scheduler assigns that pod a node or something to it. Okay. So basically after this, it will assign them, and kubelet, using the kubelet, it will be basically like, you can say it up, like it will pull the, it will take up the pod. if there is any container inside that this pod, the kubelet will start running that container in that Docker machine. So all of them have their own status, and like they will update the pods and everything. I just like using this diagram. I just wanted to show it in a very simplified way that whenever a pod is created, it is initially not yet run or scheduled. It is just written somewhere. So this will be a pending state of that pod. Whenever I say running state, it means that pod is scheduled on the node and at least one container is running. And what happened, like using this scheduler and kubelet, and then when it is completely run without any errors, without any errors, I say that it is in the succeeded state. And if any of the container returns some error, I'll say it's in the failed state. And if I'm not able to locate like where the pod is or anything else, it will be in an unknown state. So this was a basic overview of how the pod's life cycle is. Did you all get for the except for services? Did you all get all the other things? Can Shubhankar take over next? Shubhankar, you there? A few yes for I hope we will. Shubhankar, you there now?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, I'll stop presenting. Also, one last thing, the lab that I told about, Kubernetes Quick Start Engine, this is a very simple lab. Once we are done with today's topics, so once Shubhankar is done, I'll just scroll through it for like 5 minutes maybe. Yeah, Shubhankar.
Okay, so good evening everyone. I'll just start sharing this. Can anyone confirm if it's visible?
Yes, Shubhankar, it is visible.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Now, as Nikita had already explained about pods, we will move on to more higher levels of abstraction. As Nikita rightly said about Kubernetes, it is all about abstraction and orchestration. So we will be looking at nodes and clusters in Kubernetes now. So this is what we're going to be covering today. So what are nodes? Then there are two very special type of nodes, master nodes and worker nodes. We'll have a brief look at what's internally inside them. And then finally, we'll have a look at clusters. Okay. So let's visualize what you have as a machine right in front of you. Okay, so this can be as simple as a watch to as complex as your own computer or your workstation. All of this have some certain special requirements. So everything will have certain CPU, certain amount of memory, RAM, certain processors, etc. Right? So when we in terms of Kubernetes and we are talking about hardware representations, we refer to them as nodes. Okay, so a node is basically a logical representation of an hardware entity. So what can be these hardware entities? Again, they can be your computer system, an entire workstation, it can be a laptop, then again it can be a virtual machine. Okay, so see, by this you should have known that we are getting to lower levels, but yes, that is what a node stands for. A node is basically always a hardware representation, a physical representation of any hardware entity. Okay, so we'll move on. So what is a node basically? A node is the smallest unit of hardware computing. Okay, so in terms of software, when you are speaking, as Nikita said, that pods are like the fundamental attributes of what should I say, software. In terms of hardware, when you're speaking, it is a node. Okay, so a node is a representation of a single machine. Now when we are talking about machine, we can be talking about right from, just as I said, we can be talking about big workstations, or we can be talking about virtual machines also. So in context of what we are studying in Google Cloud, in the Google Cloud project as well, most of the nodes, in fact all of the nodes are maybe virtual machine instances only. Okay, so like in most production systems, this nodes will either be a physical machine or a virtual machine hosted on a cloud provider like GCP. Okay, so when you are talking about hardware representation only, and you are talking about production level, so that node will basically correspond to any workstation based physical machine that is actually physically present. But when you're talking in terms of cloud computing, a node would then mean anything that represents hardware, right? When you're creating virtual machines, remember that you specify a boot disk, you specify a number of CPUs and stuff like that, right? So in terms of cloud providers, a virtual machine consists of a node. Okay. So this is the node-based architecture of Kubernetes. Again, Kubernetes has multiple layers of architectures. Okay, and there are different visualizations of each level of architecture. So now what we're looking at is the peer-to-peer and node-to-node interaction. Okay, so notice that there is a developer who is only concerned with creating the application. Okay, and so the developer directly is in contact with something called as an API server. Okay, we'll get to the API server in a moment, but see that the developer is only in contact with an API server. That's it. He or she in this case is not concerned about uh, the deployment, the configurations, and all such stuff. She's currently only involved in creating the application, right? Not deploying it. Now notice that there are three separate entities currently. So you can think of it as nodes, and there might be even more nodes. Like in production scale, there are like hundreds and thousands of nodes, and like think that you can see that there is only an API server and controller scheduler stuff like this in only one node, right? So there are two identical nodes, one at the bottom and one at the right, and there is one special node that is like highlighted in orange, right? So that is what we call as the master node, and all the nodes which have uh, same contents, no, not the exact contents but the same similar contents, are called as worker nodes. And these worker nodes are actually interacting with the end user. So whenever an user is interacting with your application, those are these worker nodes that are cooperating with it, right? So I cannot like actually tilt this picture, but if you can imagine tilting this picture by 45 degrees, you would see that API server is at the top, followed by both of these kubelets placed on a straight line, followed by the user at the bottom, right? So that is significant part of this the node based architecture, that it is a form of client server architecture, right? People who have been developing web apps know that there is something called as a server, there is something called as a client. The server keeps track of stuff, and it is basically responsible for sending data. The front end part is concerned with displaying data. It is similar along those lines, right? So yeah, so now we'll move on to the master node. Okay, so see that the master node has only been accessed through an API outside. Okay, so this is one of the very famous functionalities of Kubernetes, that Kubernetes has a central API. Okay, and you can access it by using the kubectl command line tool, I should say. So see that CLI and UI, that is the Kubernetes console. But in case of GCP, it's the Google Kubernetes Engine console that you can see. Both of those interact with the API. Okay, so an API exposes functions in response to certain activities, right? So whenever you have to get something, you ask kubectl get, let's say node, so kubectl get nodes. When you require pods, you say kubectl get pods, okay, and stuff like that. So that is how you are communicating with the entire Kubernetes layer. And when I'm talking about the Kubernetes layer, the only aspect that you get to touch is the API part. And the API in turn talks with the master node that is working internally, right? So the API, okay, I'm sorry about that. The API talks with the API server inside the master node. Okay, so there can be only one master node in a cluster, and there can be multiple worker nodes. Okay, so the one master node has these functionalities that it has an API server, and it is communicating with a key value store called as etcd. It has a scheduler and it has various controllers, right? So this is just an overview of what the master node comprises of. The API server is basically the internal API that is handling all the other stuff. So the controllers are basically, what should I say, controlling what resource should be sent, what should be accepted, etc. We'll see in the following slides what each of those are. We have a key value store, and so like this is the basic point of entry, right? So this is when you type right kubectl get pods. This is what is happening. Your command line tool is interacting with an API. The API is interacting with an API server. The API server then decides what to do, and based on that, it orders further instructions. Okay. So moving on. So the components of Masternode, the first and very foremost is the API server. And so the API server is also called as the front end of the control plane. So the control plane is a very fancy term, and it can mean many different things also. But in terms of what we are seeing currently, the control the control plane is the layer which you are talking to, and the control plane is the layer where all of your interactions are getting to the master node. Okay, so that's the control plane. So the API server stands in front of the control plane, and that is the only point where we are talking to, right? So as mentioned earlier, it is only through an external API that we are able to get to the API server. And as mentioned earlier again, that whenever you are talking with any Kubernetes component, we can only access up to the API server. Okay. So next up we have a key value store that is called an etcd. So what is a key value store? A key value store is like a dictionary in Python, map in JavaScript or any other like any other programming language. So a key and a value. So that is what etcd stores. It's using only simple terms like keys and values. etcd can actually store the entire configuration of one cluster. So think about how varied this can be, but in essence, it is all keys and values, right? So for certain keys, it stores certain values, and based on all of that, it can actually store the entire configuration of like one cluster. And whenever you want to get any information about the node, any worker node, for instance, the master node will then communicate with the etcd to find out where your worker node lies and what data must be retrieved, and based on that it takes certain decisions ahead. Okay, so next up we have the controller. The controller in general terms, like in even in when you are creating web apps, there is a term also called as controller. So the controller is basically the doing part. Okay, so in when I'm talking about web apps, I generally infer that routes is something that you are hitting to go to somewhere, and there is something called as the controller that is working for what you want to do when you go there. Okay, so this is also the part for the controller in the master node. It should like it always does, it is the working part, right? So it always asks for what is required, what must be done now. Whenever you hit an API endpoint, it decides what to do right now. And apart from that, it's one of its monitoring part is also that checking the current state of the nodes and stuff like that. Okay, so and one final part from the master node is scheduler. Okay, so a scheduler is like a job-based system. It basically devises certain strategies for incoming API requests, right? So it's not like always one person is continuously hitting one, then second, then third. There may be multiple API calls, and then at that time you need to figure out, right? What should I divert this to this node? Should I divert it to another node, etc., etc. So all of those is basically the part of the scheduler. The scheduler in general term schedules, right? So what needs to be done is done by the controller, but where it needs to be done is done by the scheduler. Okay. Apart from that, it also like checks the quality of the nodes. Healthy in the sense, is it up to date? Is the application running that is stable there? Has it degraded or not? And all other stuff like that. So all of that is then covered by the scheduler. Okay, so I'll start with worker nodes, but let's say if we have any doubt. If you have any doubts up to master node, you can ask them right now. Um, okay, so we have another discussion in the chat section going on currently. If you have any doubts, just let me know, or should I continue with worker nodes? What is the work? What is the work of etcd? Rakesh is asking. Well, the etcd is like a database, right? It's a database for the entire Kubernetes structure. For like every application, let's say you have a cluster, and all the data regarding to the configuration of that cluster is managed by etcd. So etcd is basically a key value pair, right? That's called like as I was mentioning, it's called like a dictionary in Python. So in similar terms, it stores a key and it stores a value, and the value is basically the entire state of your running application. And so using etcd, it can your like API server and your controller can find out certain things very fast, right? So it can find out which node to concern right now, which healthy node should we do, what node has degraded, what is the current state of a node, and all other stuff like that. So that's the work of etcd. In essence, etcd is only a storage mechanism, so we can store data in it and we can retrieve data from it. So I hope that clears it out. Okay, so we seem like we have no more doubts, and I'll then continue on to worker nodes. So now you can see that the Kubernetes master node, this is the master node on the left hand side, interacts with various worker nodes. It's not only one worker node, but it's various worker nodes. And look that worker nodes internally comprise of multiple pods running. So as mentioned by Nikita earlier, pod is the fundamental entity of a software-based application, right? And we are currently looking at a node that is a hardware based application. So every node in essence is a physical system in itself, right? So there are multiple pods, there are optional add-ons that can be configured based on whether you need it or not, and there are three special entities apart from it. Those are kubelet, container runtime, and kubeproxy. Okay, so worker nodes basically only consist of hierarchy based mechanisms of, so it basically stores all the pods that are like required for your application to run. And also it stores three other parts like kubelet, container runtime, and kubeproxy. So like we'll move on. So next up, we'll start with the components of the worker nodes. So that's one is the primary component here is the kubelet, and so the kubelet is actually functional in every worker node, and it is one of the fundamental agents, right? It is one of the most talking entities. So for every node, the kubelet has access to the node CPU, RAM, and any other stuff. And it can also expose the CPU, RAM, and all the other storage outside, right? You will see why we need to expose this part. But yes, that is what kubelet does. It can actually expose all the resources, the physical resources, that is the CPU, the processor, RAM, storage, to an outside entity, right? So the kubelet is, like I said, the controlling agent for any worker node. So it receives data from the master node. So that is basically the API server that is telling it what to do, and based on that, it sends back information if needed, right? So if from the master node, if there is a request to some node, so its kubelet, the kubelet inside that worker node will first detect it, and then it will do the task and it will get back to the master node. It also monitors the pods, and so like it is continuously checking for every pod and whether it is still functional or not, still functional or not. And let's say one of your pods go down, so it will immediately report it back to the master node. Okay, so now what this does is, let's say your master node knows that one worker node has 6 pods running inside it, and so it is based on that it is distributing the tasks to like several worker nodes. But let's say two of your pods go down, right? So that's a 33% loss right there. And so let's say your API server or the master node doesn't know of this fact, so then what it will try again is that it will keep on sending, but there is an increased load right here. So maybe your node can fail working, right? So in those cases, the kubelet then reports back to master node that, oh wait, don't just redirect the traffic to me. Two of my pods have fallen, and just let me know what is the next step that I should take. Okay, so the master node then sees that, okay, oh, like two pods have fallen, and I need to do something about that. Okay, so that's what kubelet is. Next up, we have the container runtime. The container, uh, the container runtime is, just wait a minute. Just give me a moment. Okay, sorry about that. So like the container runtime basically says that it is responsible for pulling images, right? So if you had been present in the Docker session earlier, on Sunday, you should have noted that Docker has a Docker Hub registry, right? Docker Hub is where you put all your images. Similarly, for Google Cloud projects, you also have image registry. So that's gcr.io and followed by something that you have. Then so all of that is then for maintained by the container runtime. So the container runtime does the work that you do occasionally, right? Docker pull, hello world, all of that is done by the container runtime. Okay. Okay, so one final point about worker nodes is the queue proxy, right? So every node has an individual IP address, right? And every IP address therefore needs to be mapped to some table to in order to find out, if I'm referring to this IP address, what machine I'm talking to. So that is the part done by queue proxy. So the queue proxy is basically the network handler of an entire worker node, right? Apart from that, it also like simple stuff of networking related points, that it handles routing all the requests, and it also handles load balancing. So that's all on worker nodes. And before we move on to clusters, do we have any doubts on with regards to worker nodes or master nodes or nodes in general? So I'll wait for a minute. If you have
So I
any
want to
doubt.
ask, what if how does other nodes get to know that master nodes have gone down?
Okay, you are asking how does the what if the master node goes down?
Yeah.
Okay, so like the master node is the central incoming point of any cluster. So let's say if your master node goes down, in that case, probably your entire cluster is currently down at that moment. Okay, and see, there is always there is a concurrent network, right? So if you can see that the master node is connected, in short, it will be connected to all the other nodes in the cluster. Okay, so if the master node goes down, there is no point of messaging, there is no information passed down, right? So using that, we can find out whether or not a node is actually functional or not. Okay, so like that's the
Also,
main. Yeah.
I would like to add to this that so that's like always the case, right? So let's say whenever we say something for load balancers as well, so you will say the load balancer redirects everything to other servers, right? So what if the load balancer fails? What will happen, right? So what happens ideally is there is some backup already planned. So if that load balancer fails, the like some like there is some backup plan from them, and everything like sort of that backup part comes to the main picture until that master node recovers or something like that. So basically, they have backups already planned for that.
Okay, thanks. And one more thing. From my understanding is that when I have worked on Kubernetes, like master node and all the other nodes are currently are on the same laptop. Suppose in my case, it was on the same laptop. So it can it happen that that master node can be a different laptop or a different machine by itself, and the worker node can be a different machines.
Actually, that is the ideal case, right? Like master node should it's better, right? Because if everything is on the same machine, then the use like the reason I want them is on different machine is because I want them to be more efficient and accurate, right? Like they should be very quick if they and they should be reachable to the master node as well. So if they are on the same machine, the like the purpose of my you must have done that because you have one machine and you wanted to test things, but ideally the case is they have different zones, and like you must have studied about regions and zones, right?
Yeah.
So we try to spread the worker nodes across different like the nodes are spread across different regions, etc.
Won't that be a different cluster? If they're in different zone, won't that be a different cluster itself by itself? In the in the same zone, I think we have one cluster, and in that
uh,
cluster we have multiple maybe one master node and multiple nodes. I'm not sure about
I
it, but it's my understanding.
Okay, I like when I was creating, I like saw there's something called as if like I when like we go onto the console, there was something called as if you want to go for multi-region, like you want to send your nodes to multi-regions in the same cluster or in the same zone. So I think we can have them in multiple zones. I'll send you the link right now, like where I had read about that. Then we can discuss further, like if that is not the case. Give me a minute.
Yeah. And
Shubhankar, till then, yeah.
one more question is how do we actually communicate, how the master communicate with the different nodes if they are on different laptop?
Well, all will involve networking concepts. Like there's something called as IP addresses, right? So
Yeah.
the service will have its own, like as I said, front end service and back end service. They all have their own IP address. So that all like happens when if you have the IP address, you can communicate over the network, right?
Yeah, actually, I just want to know if you can give a demo of starting a master node and the worker node on different network, different machine by itself.
Okay, like right now I cannot do
Later,
because
later.
okay, sure. I even like I haven't tried it this way. I'll try and let you know then. Don't
Sure,
worry about
thanks.
that. About the regions part, I'll just find the link right now and send over the chat. Okay.
No problem.
Shubhankar, yeah, you can continue.
So, like Akshat has a question that end user requests come through the API server in the master node, or is the API server in the master node for handling instructions for Kubernetes from CLI GUI? Both of those are correct, Akshat. Basically, whenever you are talking from the CLI or the GUI, all of those resources get passed through an API, right? So, just as I was mentioning that, let's say you are running a command to get all the pods. So that's kubectl get pods, right? Internally, what that CLI does is it is requesting an API access, like get an API access for certain pods. Okay, so that API so the API there is an abstraction layer. Okay, so based on from where you are getting, it will build the required API calls that are needed. That will then get passed down to the API server. The API server is the talking point of the master node from us, from our side. So the API server then decides and based on that, it takes certain decisions for what you have to do. So is that clear, Akshat? Okay. Any more doubts? Okay, so we seem to have no more doubts, and then quickly cover on clusters. You can see in the figure right now. So let's say it's a beehive based structure, and all the nodes here correspond to individual cells. And so whenever you are adding a cell into it, you are expanding the cluster's entire CPU access and RAM access, right? So that is in essence what a cluster is. A cluster is a combination of multiple nodes, right? It can be huge amount of nodes, and all of those are encapsulated inside a cluster. That was just a visual representation of what a cluster symbolizes. So, like just as we were talking earlier regarding the what was regarding the worker nodes, that you need to get your resources and you need to share your resources outside, so that all of one node's resources can get access to other resources as well. So in that, the point of abstraction there is called as a cluster. So in Kubernetes, all the nodes that you have, those are running separate entities, pool their resources together to form a very big machine in that case. And so, like when we deploy programs, what the cluster does is it individually distributes the entire task onto separate nodes, right? So this is one part that is taken away from us, and we don't need to manually decide, okay, this node is better suited for computing large data sets, so maybe this node should perform the model related task, and this node should do some other task. It's not like that. So when you deploy an application on a cluster, the cluster then intelligently decides, right? It has certain configuration stored, and it can decide on its own what task to do on which node, right? So, and based on that, it also performs certain features, like let's say one of your node is removed, right? So let's say all the pods inside a node are fallen down and there is no way of regaining those back up. So like you decide to take that node away, and when you take that node away, suddenly the load gets increased on other nodes as well. So at that time, the your cluster takes certain decisions on how to balance the load, how to distribute the task among the leftover parts. Okay, and the reverse is also true. So let's say currently you are capable of adding more nodes, so that you are adding more machines and you are adding to the total processor, and you are adding to the total storage. So when you do that, again, what this will do is this should ideally reduce the load, right? And you are adding free stuff onto it. So again, this part is then handled by the cluster in itself. The cluster then again shares the load evenly among all its other worker nodes. So that's like two of the tasks that cluster performs. And so the main idea behind working a cluster is, right, the application, right? Or I'm sorry. So the application that is running on a cluster should be independent of the end user and should be independent of the developer. Okay, so this is the two level features of clusters, that let's say it shouldn't matter uh, where the individual machines are and what task they are doing. You should not be concerned about that. As a programmer, what you should be concerned is building the application, right? Kubernetes, with the help of clusters, manages all the deployment related tasks, and once it is done, the program is ready right now, right? So that is then deployed to the end users. So again, the end users have no idea that all of these clusters are doing this work and that work in order to like find out what is happening. Okay, so that's all about clusters. And one final small topic that is inside this is not in any of the labs that is concerned, but since we are taking so much theory, I thought that we might as well take this one. So this is called as the persistent volume, and you can see that in the diagram, what it does is uh, all those cylinders that you can see, those are like external hard drives, right? So let's say you have a hard drive of 2 terabytes on the left, that is then connected by a wire to one of the nodes. So this is what persistent volume does. Persistent volume, on its name, it is persistent. It acts like a database. So let's say one of your node goes down. So not the nodes, the internal pods go down. So then all the data stored inside the pod is lost, right? Because that pod went down and the data was in it internally. But let's say you need some config level data that needs to be permanently stored. So in that case, you can like attach persistent volumes to all of your nodes, and based on the like storage capacity of your persistent volumes, you can like access certain special features, right? So you can, this is basically acting as a database. So like in web app based concepts, you have something called as in memory data storage, and then you have something called as databases. In memory data storage is lost when your server goes down, but all of the data that you store in a database is permanently sealed off until you remove it on your own. In the same way, persistent volume acts as a database layer for all the nodes, and like those are specific to the nodes. So you can see that they are connected to the nodes and not to the cluster, right? So every node can have its own persistent volume, and based on that, it can take certain decisions. It can store certain points. So yeah, that's it for all the theory part that was there today. It was a lot of theory, and some parts might have been boring as well. So if you have any doubts, um,
I have a doubt. So,
oh,
hello.
yes, you are audible. Actually.
So, persistent volumes are not shared between two nodes, right?
No, they aren't shared.
So, but so like, what if the database? How do they? So they replicate the database for every volume, or
Yes,
how does that work?
for all the config related data that needs to be present like throughout all the nodes, those get stored in the etcd, right? So that is all the config level data. For individual nodes, you connect it to a persistent volume, and then in certain cases, if you feel that persistent volume also needs to be shared, then you can write special rules for configuring those. But the good use, as per good use of Kubernetes, it is recommended that you keep your persistent volume separate. Like you keep it connected to a node and not share it, because it stores node level data, right? Not shared data. For shared data, you have that CD working there as well.
Okay.
Okay. Any more doubts?
Abhishek, I had sent you the link on the chat, so just refer that once.
Um, okay, so there seems to be no more doubts, and okay, then that's it from my side. I'll stop presenting.
Just a minute. Palak, we'll take the lab, or like in 5 minutes, just go through that.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Nikita.
We will just go through the lab in 5 minutes.
Yes, okay, we can do that.
Like this is a very simple lab. I won't be starting the lab. One second. Okay, give me just a minute. Yeah, so this is basically a lab that is, we all that we learned right now, we can try to like go through that lab. We first have to sign in and all those things. That's fine. This is a repetitive step. We will be selecting a compute zone. So basically, cluster, we have to create one cluster. So okay, as like someone asked me that can we give a demo on all this, honestly, like I haven't even tried that. I will also try my best that if I am able to do that, we will let you know. For now, what we are doing is we are creating one cluster. Shubhankar,
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
yeah, no problem. So yeah, so basically in this lab, what we exactly have to do in this lab is basically just an overview of, like we just have to set up our own cluster and nodes, and we have to deploy one application to the cluster. That's it. So let's see whatever, like initially it's okay. Let's do it. So what we have to do is basically, yeah, so basically we have to, whenever I say create a cluster, what happens by default is 3 nodes will be given assigned to me with this location I like have already. So these 3 nodes in this region, some like for now all these nodes are in US Central 1A. About the question that can the nodes be in different regions, so like even I was studying about that, like when I was reading about types of clusters, according to me it was yes. So we will like read more about it if that's possible. But for now, by default, whenever I say create clusters, it will like create 3 nodes for me. So yeah, the cluster is created. It was that simple to create one cluster. And okay, one thing I want to mention is there are two things. All that all the Kubernetes things of creating pods, services, deployments, all these things are assigned using the command of kubectl. But these hardware things like these all things, as you see, so clusters and nodes, so these are accessible through gcloud. So I need some permissions, or I need some authentication credentials to interact with this cluster. Okay, so I'll just say get credentials. Obviously, now that cluster has all my applications data running inside it. It must have some credentials, right? So I'll just get those credentials in order for me to do other operations on that cluster. Then it's okay. In this lab, it's very simple. In this lab, you just write, there is a deployment called as hello server. Do one thing. By now you must have known like what this image is. There is some image called as hello app1.io. In this image, there must be something like it must be printing hello world or something. And whenever I go to this image, like there must be some, whenever I run this image, it should run and print hello world. So my deployment is very simple. I'm saying do one thing. The name of the deployment is hello server. Just pull this image out and like just print it. That's it. Like just run this image. That's it. So whenever I say create deployment, deployments will be covered in more detail in the next coming sessions. Don't worry about that. But yeah, for now, like we will create this deployment. And you can see in this case, image specifies contain. If you read, all those things are same as well. So now whenever like I'm like I have created the deployment, but now I want like this deployment to be like exposed to the outside world at this port number. So when I say port 8080, I should be able to access whatever like I have deployed inside this deployment image. So I'm just simply exposing it, and I'm writing the type load balancer, because ideally it's not necessary that one deployment will have this. If you all have no load balancer, if you all remember the demo that we did that day, so you all must have remembered like even if I have 3 like servers running together, so like the type of the deployment is load balancer, and like the port is 8080. So that's it. Like it should be load balanced between different servers, and I should be able to access that through port 8080, this deployment. So that's it. The deployment is created, and you all must be able to see the cluster IPs as well. And as soon as I go to this external IP that I get from here, I'll be able to see the deployment. And after that, since clusters obviously take up a lot of your resources, I should delete them and clean them up. As I already said, in order to whenever I am trying to work with clusters or nodes, I'll use gcloud. And whenever I am trying to run with deployments or services, I'll be using kubectl. That is a command that this I use. So the lab was very simple. In this lab, we didn't even create a pod or a service or the deployment files. The deployment was already very simple, just printing hello world. So we thought to take it today. So it was a very simple lab of 30, like it should be done very quickly. For the other things, the other lab, if you have seen, it's something called as orchestration with cloud, and it has pod services creating own files. So we'll be covering that, I guess, maybe tomorrow, that we will see. So I hope the lab part was clear. Okay. Any doubts or anything about today, or any feedback you guys would like to give us, that don't go this way, we are getting bored, don't do that, or anything? We are open to that. Palak, I think you can also join, and Shubhankar. So yeah, we are waiting for like a little feedback on how because Kubernetes was very difficult even for us to explain, and even honestly, we are not experts there. We are also learning, but we are trying to simplify things for you so that labs become easier. So let us know if there's anything.
Yes. Neeta, I'll just present my screen once to.
Yeah, I'll stop it.
So today we covered Kubernetes first with an example, then the architecture. After that, Shubhankar covered nodes, clusters, master and worker nodes, and a persistent volume short theory. And then we did a walkthrough of the lab. The lab is in Skillbatch 6, Lab 2. So if you go to this site of Google Cloud, so you can find that lab. So yeah, this was the overall view of the session. The recordings will be uploaded on YouTube, and the relevant PPTs will be shared, like whatever Shubhankar and Nikita had presented today. And this doc is available with all of you. So if you are going with the flow. So thank you all for attending. Tomorrow again we meet at 5:45, and we will try to take till 7:30. Today it is 7:40. So any feedback that you want to give, or anything, any doubts that you have, you can wait back. Can you all post the remaining? There, yes, I'll be sharing all the slides. Actually, I'm waiting for my study jam day 4 video to be posted on YouTube, and after that I'll be posting all the presentation links in the description of YouTube channel, so everything will be found there. It's 44% processed there. I hope it will be processed till today night.